That was the moment a year ago, on January the 14th, 2024, when King Frederik X of Denmark was seen for the first time by the public as Europe's newest monarch. Hello, I'm Daniel Rosney. Welcome to It's Raining Men. And in this episode, we're going to be looking at the new-ish Danish king, finding out who he is, how his first year went on the throne, and what sort of leader he's promised to be. He did surprise Danes quite early on, because just weeks after becoming king, he released a book. It's been billed as his manifesto as monarch. It was written with another author, and it's called The King's Word. It's only been released in Danish, but with the help of AI, I've managed to read some of it in English. And there aren't any controversies in it, but his first New Year's speech, just a few weeks ago, he did mention Greenland, an autonomous territory of Denmark, and that has raised some eyebrows because it came days before Donald Trump repeated his intention for the US to acquire it. We'll find out what more, if anything, King Frederick can do or say. So let's go back first, towards the end of 2023, because there were the beginnings of a royal scandal brewing. Rumours in the press around the state of the marriage between the heir to the throne of Denmark, Crown Prince Frederick, and his wife Mary were rife. Because Frederick had been pictured in Madrid on a night out with a Mexican socialite called Genoveva Casanova, an actress and TV personality. In the Danish and Spanish media, there was an insinuation of an affair. The royal couple stayed silent and still have on the matter, but Casanova posted a legal letter on her Instagram page, and it is still there, where she flat out denied the allegations of a romantic liaison. But the damage was already done to an extent, and it became known as the Casanova scandal, and it is still talked about in Denmark. Just weeks after all of this, seemingly out of absolutely nowhere, Queen Margrethe II, who had reigned over Denmark since 1972, said she was stepping down, becoming the first Danish king or queen in nearly 900 years to abdicate. Her decision meant that there would be no reigning female monarch in the world anymore. And it was a quick process because just 2 weeks after she announced her decision, Denmark had a king as head of state for the first time in more than 50 years.
Min mor, Hendes Majestæt, Dronning Margrethe II.
The reign had been handed over, and a tearful Frederick came out onto the balcony of Christiansborg Palace, which was once home to the royal family, but is now used for the Danish parliament. It's where the Prime Minister proclaimed him King of Denmark, which includes the territories of the Faroe Islands and Greenland. Tens of thousands of people lined the streets of the capital, Copenhagen, and in that crowd was Silla Bakalus, a royal reporter for the Danish tabloid BT. Silla, where were you on that day?
I was at Amalienborg, where they actually live. It was like euphoria. It was really, really wild. The monarchy is really standing strong. It's really popular, and it's mostly because of Queen Margrethe, Queen Margaret, if you want to say it in English, who's been like really, really a popular queen. She has done a really good job in her 52 years of reigning. And it was a really good job because it was a hard time when she became a queen back in the 70s. It wasn't that popular back then. But she was kind of like Queen Elizabeth, you know, when you have a queen for a long time, the longer they are sitting, the more popular they get. And it was the same with her.
And she shocked Denmark and the world on New Year's Eve 2023, going into 2024. And I remember getting that news notification and watching the abdication speech on my phone. So let's listen to some of that now with some English translation help.
Om 14 dage har jeg været Danmarks dronning i 52 år.
In 2 weeks' time, I've been Queen of Denmark for 52 years. Such an amount will leave its mark on anybody, also on me. The time takes its toll and the number of ailments increases. One cannot undertake as much as one managed in the past. In February this year, I underwent extensive back surgery. Everything went well thanks to the competent health personnel who took care of me. Inevitably, the operation gave cause to thoughts about the future, whether now would be an appropriate time to pass on the responsibility to the next generation. I've decided that now is the right time. On 14th January 2024, 52 years after I succeeded my beloved father, I will step down as Queen of Denmark. I will hand over the throne to my son, Crown Prince Frederick.
It was like a big, really, really big surprise because she has always been saying that she will never abdicate because the Danish kings and queens, they never abdicate. They always die on the throne. As you say in Denmark, they will sit until they die. And she was like, I will do that unless I'll get a health issue.
There was this really tender moment between Queen going into King, mother into son, where she signs the abdication papers. He then took her seat. She stood up and said, God save the king.
Yeah, because it was like a really emotional scene and you could see her. She's like a royal from the old school of royals who never show emotions. And she actually showed like some emotions there. It was a big moment. It was like the end of her career as a queen, and it was like the first step of her son's. And then the phrase she's very well known for at her New Year's speeches to say, "God save you all, God save Denmark." So I think it was a little like that she said, "God save the king."
Her tears were not the only tears that we saw that day. When Frederick came out on the balcony, he was wiping them off his face. Is he always that emotional?
Yeah, he's very emotional. He's like the opposite of his mother. I don't know how long he had to prepare for the role because nobody really knows how long the queen did give him to prepare for it.
If you compare his proclamation of becoming king to the other recent European, which was King Charles becoming king, in the UK, there was this coronation event inside Westminster Abbey where there was this religious ceremony that was part of becoming king. That didn't happen in Denmark. It was very much sign one document, sign another document, and now you're king. There wasn't this religious element involved. There was no crowning.
I think a lot of people actually were surprised in Denmark that there wouldn't be a coronation, even though it hasn't been there for 300 years or something. I don't remember the exact number, but a lot of people were surprised because they just watched King Charles and they were like, oh, why isn't he going to do the same? But no, they don't do that, and I don't think it meant anything. People are often calling it the coronation anyway because the words for the Danish one where he was actually celebrated, or to think that actually happened, and the coronation is so close. So.
But from last January, how's he been since then?
It was a little shaky in the beginning because I was with him in Poland, I think in the end of January, just like 2 weeks after he became a king, because he was going for this industries, Danish, they go for these work visits, a lot of Danish companies. And the king is with them, and they have a lot of deals there. And they do that, I don't know, maybe twice a year normally. And it was actually planned before the abdication, so he went through with it. And when you know him, as I do a little because I follow him a lot, you could see that he was not like comfortable with the new role yet. So the speeches were very shaky, and he didn't really know how to do it. I have done a lot of covering the British royals too, and I think you kind of maybe saw a little of the same with King Charles. I think that he's a little better because he maybe is a better speaker than the Danish king. That's like his weakness. He's not a good speaker, and he knows it. And he really doesn't like to do speeches. He doesn't like to prepare for them. He doesn't write them himself. We all know that he, in his younger years, didn't really want to become a king.
Within weeks of him becoming king, he did release this book, which I think the translation is The King's Word. Kongeord, is that the right pronunciation?
Kongeord, yeah.
And one of the passages, I've read some of the English translation, and it says that it's no secret that as a child and young person, I had difficulty coming to terms with the idea of one day being king. I just wanted to be like every other boy my age, and for many years, calling myself king was not something I wanted at all.
Yeah, but it's not new. I mean, when he had his 50th birthday 6 years ago or something, they released a bigger book with the same author. And there he also told a lot about how hard it was in his childhood being the crown prince and be aware of that he was going to become king one day. And he actually didn't want it. He hated when his friends in school were teasing him about it. And actually his younger brother, Prince Joachim, who is like 13 months younger than the older one, was protecting him in school.
There was another bit in the book that he released last year where he says, I remember my 18th birthday as something close to the end of the world. And I guess that must be because turning 18 meant that he was legally able to inherit the throne at any point.
Yeah, that he should have a more public role, I think. This year they have been on 2 state visits to Norway and Sweden. And if you ask the ministers afterwards, they say that, of course, the royal opens a lot of doors because they do. And all these, what are they called, CEOs for all these big companies, when they go with them also on these company visits, they also say it makes it so much easier for us. When we went to Poland, there was one of Denmark's richest men with him. They were like doing something on a metro line in Warsaw, and it was a lot of easier for them to get the contract because the king came with them. I mean, every time we are abroad with them, it's something with the foreign secretary. He's also with them, and all of his staff and office. So,
and I guess also it ensures that journalists like yourselves cover these events that governments have organized to ensure that trade deals can happen between different nations. If the royals are there, it makes a better picture, doesn't it? Now, one of the other things that has happened in the first year is King Frederick and Queen Mary have announced the ending or the phasing out of these royal warrants that companies and brands were able to use to sell their products. We've had that in the UK as well for hundreds of years. In fact, just a few weeks ago, for the first time in 170 years, the chocolate brand Cadbury didn't get it. King Charles chose not to renew it. Queen Camilla gave a royal warrant to her hairdresser.
yeah.
That's being phased out in Denmark. Does it have any economic impact?
The companies think so. They are upset about this. Actually, I talked to the CEO for Danish Crown. It's a big butchers. They do a lot of sausages and to all of the world, and they say it means a lot for them. When they sell something in the Middle East or something, they want the crown on.
And essentially, it was just an approval stamp that the royal household enjoys this product or likes this product.
Yeah. But it means something. It's just like, they think it's a bit bigger, a better quality that they have it. So they're upset, but they have said that nobody gets it anymore. They would just don't have it. So, yeah.
And that's because the royal household, well, King Frederick said that they didn't want to give undue prominence to one company more than another. So it was their way of making it an equal playing field.
Yeah.
It's also a way to appear more modern in 2025.
He's doing quite well, and a quite funny thing in it is that he is like, every time he's out somewhere, he's saying, we are here as the heads of state of him and his wife. So he is like saying that we are doing this together. And I think it actually suits him, or actually he likes it, because then he doesn't have to take all this responsibility alone. Some would say that they are kind of doing it a modern way, the king and queen together. Normally the king is always highest, and he is, of course, because he is still doing the New Year's speech. But yeah, when you do look at these pictures they send out and all of these things, then they're like really equal.
So there is no Republican movement at the minute that the King of Denmark should be worried about.
So. No, the closest one was with the Casanova thing. But even that.
Yeah.
I don't know how much it impacted, but it did do some kind of impact, because I think people were just shocked because they always see this as a fairy tale couple. So nobody really thought about that actually could be problems. We don't know what happened there. We just know what was on the pictures and what we could see. And even, I mean, everybody just say it was a really bad judgment error for him to to be there.
And I guess we'll probably never know the full story about what, if anything, did happen there, or if it had any influence on Queen Margrethe's decision to abdicate. Thanks very much for your time, Silla.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And now that we understand a bit more about the personality and the man behind the king, we're now going to take a look at the politics and the power of Frederick X. Denmark has one of the world's oldest monarchies, second only to Japan. The Danish royal family can be traced back more than 1,000 years to the early 900s, and the first king of a united Denmark, who reigned from the 950s to the 980s, inspired the name of something that you might even be using to listen to this right now: Harald Bluetooth. But that's a whole other episode. There are no Harolds anymore, but there are a lot of Fredericks and Christians. Since 1513, so more than 500 years ago, the monarch of Denmark has either been called Frederick or Christian, with the only exception being Margrethe, and she only inherited because her dad, Frederick IX, didn't have any sons. She obviously did, and he's Frederick X. And his eldest child is, you guessed it, Crown Prince Christian, the future Christian XI, if his dad's time on the throne ensures the monarchy continues. Last January, I was in Copenhagen on the first full day of the new king's reign, and I was fascinated by how jubilant people were, because my only comparison was in September 2022, when I was in London when the UK got a new king. But that followed the death of Queen Elizabeth II, who had reigned for 70 years. Yes, Margrethe had reigned for 52 years, but she hadn't died, and there was no death in this succession. So it felt a much more exciting part of history, and definitely celebratory. It's the first day of having a king. First full day.
Yeah, I think he's lovely. Yeah, I think he has a very nice and kind energy to him.
Do you like having a royal family?
Well, I would say it's growing on me. I mean, I haven't been against it or not for it, but now I feel like, yeah, well, it's an asset, I guess, for Denmark. Yeah.
Can I just get your name and your age?
Yes, Emily, and I'm 38 years old.
Thank you very much, Emily. I'll let you get into the warm.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
My name is Gustav, and I'm 25 years old. I think it's because he's not a politician. I mean, politicians, if we had a president, they will divide the country even more. But he's a figurehead that can unite the country because he's not political. So, and he's got a lovely family and lovely wife, lovely children, and overall, he's just a great king in my opinion. There's not too much drama compared to the British one, but I mean, as I said, it's because they're not political that the people love them. And if we had a president, it would be another story. I believe we would be more divided.
Pretty proud of being born and raised in a country with a long tradition for a monarchy. And like me, in our time, it's not really the real ruler of the country, so they don't have the power they used to have, and in that way I just think it's a nice symbol for the country instead of being some kind of ruler or something. My name is Alexander and I'm 28.
What does the monarchy do for Denmark? What do you get out of it?
Well, good question. They're more of a beacon now than they're something else. And of course, it's a bit funny to think about that there are some people just born to having the perks and the living areas that they have. But yeah, I think it just means that it's quite nice to say that you live in a kingdom instead of living in a republic.
I think we need to get used to him being very different from his mother, but I think that he will grow even more, I think.
Does it feel strange having a king now?
Well, I'm old enough to have experienced a king.
No.
Yes, I am. But when I was teenager, we had a king. But of course, I don't remember that much.
I would never have said.
Yeah, what I was. And yeah, but it feels strange because, of course, she's been here for 52 years and made a great mark on our country and been such a good representative. But I think the couple is something new.
And what does the monarchy mean to you?
Everything. I mean, I couldn't imagine a world without it, or couldn't imagine a Denmark without it. That would be the right way to say it. Yeah.
Can I just ask your name, sorry?
Tina.
Tina, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much. You don't look a day over 52. I'm so surprised.
Thank you very much.
Obviously, none of that is scientific and it's not any official polling. It's a small sample size of people who were basically out in Copenhagen that day that would speak to me as I was waving a microphone in their face. But it does feel that Frederick has his people's support with his motto, united, committed for the Kingdom of Denmark. And like the vast majorities of monarchies that have still managed to survive, they're still clinging on. Denmark is a constitutional monarchy, so the head of state now doesn't have any independent political power, but they do sign acts of parliament into law, although Frederick does need it to be countersigned by a cabinet minister. But what else does he actually do, and how will his reign be judged? I'm not the person to answer that, but somebody else can. Lars, hello. Why don't you introduce yourself?
My name is Lars Hovbakke Sørensen, and I'm an associate professor at the University College Absalon in Denmark. I'm a historian, and I have been specialized in the history of the royal house in Denmark and the history of royal houses in Europe.
So could you give us a brief understanding of the kind of responsibilities that the King of Denmark has?
Well, you can say in the 20th century and in the 21st century, he has primarily had a symbolic role. The kings lost their power in Denmark as well as in many other European countries in the beginning of the 20th century. And since that time, in the case of Denmark, since 1901, the king has had as his primary job to be a person who's symbolized the state and the nation, and which should also unite all the Danes so that they had something in common. That is a very, very important thing, especially when the society became more and more complex with various cultures, religions, and so on and so forth in the late 20th century.
So it is a very similar role to that of other kings that we see in Europe. The King of Spain, the King of the United Kingdom, the King of the Netherlands. It is a symbolic role.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it ever political?
Of course, you could have some examples sometimes of kings or queens who are saying something which you could interpret as a political statement, more or less, but it's very seldom. It's primarily the symbolic role, which is the important thing today.
And the Danish royal family, when you compare it to other monarchies in Europe, it doesn't actually cost that much. On average, it costs 8 times less than the British royal family.
In Denmark, you have a society with a large degree of equality between people socially, economically, and so on and so forth. And the Danes are very proud of that we have this kind of equality. And it's a part of our national self-understanding, I think, actually, that we are more equal than many other people around in the world. And therefore, we also like, or the Danes like, to have a royal house which is not that expensive, because it should not be that different from the rest of society. We like also when our royal persons are very informal, like, for instance, the new king is. So he lives to a large extent up to the expectations by the Danish people of how a royal person should be. And in other countries, you have other expectations because you have other traditions.
The expectations of a monarchy in 2025 is sort of a strange sentence because it's a historical system in a very modern society. Is there any Republican movement in Denmark at all?
Yeah, you have a small Republican movement, but you also must say that the Danish royal house is one of the most popular and has been for many years. According to opinion polls, the support for the monarchy is around 80%.
And one of the symbolic roles that the monarch of Denmark has is this New Year's Eve speech that is given. Are those speeches live?
Only in Denmark and Norway have a speech called the New Year's speech. In the other monarchies, it's a Christmas speech on the 25th of December. But in Norway and Denmark, it is on the 31st of December of New Year's Eve. But only in Denmark, not in Norway, but only in Denmark, we have this tradition of that it should be live. And it has been a tradition since 1941, actually, but always live. And that is a tradition which has been now continued by King Frederick X, which he had taken over from his mother.
How did his first speech go a few weeks ago? I guess there must have been a lot of expectation amongst the Danes about what he will, what he won't say.
A lot of Danes were nervous about could he do it as good as his mother did always, because her speeches were so popular. According to the opinion polls, 80 or 90% or something like that in Denmark thought that he made a good speech afterwards. You can say there were no big surprises in the speech by King Frederick, which you used.
It's still a year on, it's still hard to describe him as the king. Let's just hear a snippet of what he said, again, translated into English.
Dagligdagen kan hurtigt løbe afsted med os.
Day-to-day life can often run away with us. Suddenly a week has passed, a month, a year. What is left? The sense of cohesion. Mary and I felt that on the 14th of January, and we feel it when we visit parts of the Kingdom of Denmark. There is a very special atmosphere when we meet you where you live and reside, when we catch a glimpse of your everyday life. We are all united and each of us committed for the Kingdom of Denmark. From the Danish minority in South Schleswig, which is even situated outside the kingdom, and all the way to Greenland. We belong together.
Is Frederick talking about Greenland seen as political? Because it's no secret that Greenland wants to be an independent country.
Well, he said not a lot about Greenland, but you used to mention Greenland in the speeches. Also, Queen Margaret did that exactly as she always mentioned the Faroe Islands.
We saw on the 1st of January that King Frederick changed the royal coat of arms of the Danish royal house. It now has a polar bear in the crest to symbolize Greenland, and there's a ram there as well to symbolize the Faroe Islands.
We don't know exactly why this was changed, but we have a large tradition or a long tradition for changing sometimes the Danish royal coat of arms. It always takes place when you have got a new monarch. It happened in 1948, where the symbol of Iceland was taken out. And it happened again in 1972 when Queen Margaret became the queen after her father, where she took out some symbols of some German regions which no longer belonged to Denmark. But to which extent it has to do also with the wish by the king to stress or to underline to Donald Trump that Greenland is Danish, nobody knows. But it may be a part of the explanation why you made this change.
It does appear that it's the Danish royal house, therefore King Frederick, flexing his soft power muscles by putting Greenland front and center of the royal coat of arms that will appear on every official document that Denmark publishes, every law that is signed. Do the Danish people and the Greenlandic people want to use King Frederick as a symbol, as a way to stand up to Trump? We know he has huge respect for the British royal family. He came to the UK on a state visit the first time he was in the White House. He cancelled a visit to Denmark more than 4 years ago because he was told that he wasn't able to buy Greenland.
Well, I think that now where the discussion has been so politicized, I don't expect the Danish king to say something about it. I don't expect him to say something directly about Donald Trump. He must leave this over to the politicians now, because it has been so politicized in the latest days.
On that then, what do Danish people actually want from their king? What do they want King Frederick to do in his day-to-day role? What does he do in his day-to-day role?
I think he is to a large extent a king who is mirroring how the Danish society has developed in the recent years. He's more informal than his mother was, because people to a large extent expect a monarch to be informal today. So in that way, he fits very well into the Danish expectations of how a modern king should be. And that is what has changed all the time in the 20th and 21st century. After the kings in Europe lost their political role, then they have also made the job in different ways, depending on who they were as persons, and also depending on how the society developed. So every monarch is different, both from country to country, but also the different Danish monarchs in the modern time, because they will always mirror the society, and that's the real interesting part. But it is how they mirrors the tendencies in society. For instance, that you're becoming more and more informal in Denmark in these years.
Thank you so much for your time, Lars. It's been fascinating understanding how King Frederick's first year has gone.
Yeah, thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to It's Raining Men. If you enjoyed it, please tell your friends who also might be interested in kings, queens, power and palaces. And it would be great if you could subscribe so more episodes appear in your feed as soon as they're ready. And if you want to suggest a topic to be explored or have any questions about monarchies or specific members of royal families, you can find us on social media. Just search It's Raining Men. There's also a weekly newsletter on Substack too. Speak soon.